Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video. Myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is Ukraine War News Update. First part now ready for the 15th of July 2025. I put off recording this for a little bit because there wasn't all that much information coming out and it didn't have the drone infographic that usually comes out from the General Staff every morning or from the Air Force. And I now have that, but there's a lack of information on the strikes last night, really. Maybe that's good news. So we're going to start with Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply to these stats. As always, you can find them linked in the description below. We have fairly typical stats, although a couple of them are ticked up. We've got personnel losses at 1,230. That's a pretty good day for the Ukrainians. Remember, these numbers refer to human beings, but statistically, that is a good number for the Ukrainians. 3 tanks, 6 troop-carrying AFVs, both under the daily average and fairly typical for the time at the moment. 52 artillery systems, another massive haul in that category. I do wonder whether, I know the larger mortar systems are included in that. I'm wondering whether they include all kind of mortar systems and crews in those numbers. That would make sense of the numbers. 2 multiple launch rocket systems and 122 vehicles and fuel tanks, fairly good in that category. Okay, we're going to go to another Chris Owicki thread here that looks at the plight of a Russian platoon commander. He recounts on video how he is walking 28 kilometers between frontline and rear positions due to Ukrainian drones suppressing vehicle movements. We've seen this recently. We're going to in fact, I'll bring this next image to you. This is phenomenal. So Intel Schizo says, I stopped counting after 100, likely close to 150 vehicles. These are destroyed Russian logistics vehicles on one road. And I presume this is an Andrew Perpetua piece. And this is a screen grab from his map. If you remember yesterday, his stats were phenomenal for Russian losses in the civilian vehicle category. Absolutely insane numbers. And I'm thinking that that is from footage of someone driving along this road. And he has added all of that footage to yesterday's numbers, to which Intel Schizo goes, well, I was counting and this is somewhere between 100 and 150 vehicles. So then we go back to this. It's all about joining the dots and making sure that the claims and the anecdotes we see match with what we understand from statistics, and it's all about building an evidence base. A Russian platoon commander recounts on video how he's walking 28 kilometers between frontline and rear positions due to Ukrainian drones suppressing vehicle movements. He says his unit lost 37 out of 40 men in only 2 weeks of assault operations. So that is a pretty hefty loss statistic. In the video, a Russian soldier can be seen walking across what appears to be open ground, likely in eastern or southern Ukraine. It's clearly very hot. Today, it's unbearable, he says. Temperatures in the region are currently up to 34 degrees centigrade or Celsius. He says, quote, I went to the rear again. Yes, I'm the platoon commander. I'm going because I don't have any fighters. We have 2 guys at the very front pulling out 200s, dead bodies. Now I have to go to the rear and the command post. The man says that he has to walk 28 kilometers to get to the rear, highlighting how Ukrainian drones are successfully suppressing Russian vehicle movements for a long way behind the front line. See the thread below for more on this. So there was another, there have been plenty of threads, looking at that problem. I've been talking about it a lot recently. He went to the front line to deliver essential supplies, but was walking back on his own because he was only one of 3 men out of 40 who were left in his unit after relentless Ukrainian attacks. Quote, on the 1st of May, they carried out an assault. And on the 2nd, I was hit, 300, wounded by shrapnel. A kamikaze drone attacked me. A fragment hit my left forearm. It's nothing, it's normal. I didn't even try to delay. I continued to work. Well, probably by the 15th, we had run out of fighters. Out of 40 people, there were 8 of us. Then 3 of us remained. Of course, they send us reinforcements. Now they are ahead. They reach us. We collect more people. Something like that. Let's go. Okay, so, it's a man walking across a field, probably not in a good mental state of mind there. So a bit of a garbled mess in terms of what he's saying, but you get the point. 1, personnel losses are huge. 2, vehicle losses, logistics vehicle losses are huge. Then we look at this image, huge losses of vehicles. So it all sort of adds up to this picture. Before we go on, I know it's a slightly bit out of order in a sense, but I talked about a Mi-8 helicopter going missing yesterday in the far east of Russia. So that is still the case. It goes missing with apparently 5 on board. I believe 3 crew and 2 technicians were on board. Search operation is underway, Russian pro-government media outlet Kommersant reported. That's a loss of a military helicopter, which I guess for the Ukrainians is good news. Now, talking about losses and whether mortars are included. If you go through this montage here, it's only a 33-second montage, but it's quite a bit of equipment getting taken out by the Pentagon unit, the 225th. I've got a badge for the 225th just there. Yeah, in Sumy region. They're using drones to advance into the Energiya area, attacking enemy drone control points and enemy logistics. That's really important, taking out drone operators. But yeah, just check out the kind of range of equipment that is being attacked in this video. So we've got a little hut there with a motorbike. Yeah, there's another motorbike there. Then bits of kit here, bish bash bosh, all sorts of stuff. And I think in there was some, I'm fairly sure if you slow it down, I'm sure there's the odd mortar in there as well. And all sorts of equipment, motorbikes, radars, just you name it, the lot. I think there were mortars in there, but I'm not 100% sure. There might be like these smaller radar points like that one. I think that was one there. If you go back, it just happens all rather quickly. Yeah. Anyway, I'll leave it to you guys to run through that. But real range of equipment. I do wonder about the artillery systems there. The really high numbers consistently. We know that they do include the larger mortars. Okay, AFU strike on a Russian communications hub here. These kind of strikes seem to be fairly consistent at the moment, either with aviation or HIMARS or whatever. In this video, why am I including this? Because I'm not really sure what's hit here, other than it looks like some kind of accumulation or command post. It's just a sheer destruction, actually. So this is a fairly sizable building hit by the Ukrainians. The guy walks inside and you get a sense of the destruction that happens inside these places as well. It's completely gutted, flames still burning in areas, walks upstairs, and you look around, it's just massive destruction. It's fairly apocalyptic in that building. So some of these strikes that take out, you don't often see them from inside, you see them from outside. Yeah, anyway, just a pretty devastating strike there on a Russian communications hub, as is claimed. Now, here we see something we don't often see at the moment. Long time no see, indeed, says Noel reports. A Ukrainian Leopard 1A5 tank is striking Russian positions in Podubne in the south-north of Velika Novosilka. And that, as mentioned, is not something you see too often. An active tank engagement, it's engaging a position there. So it's being used, I figure, offensively there, kind of active defense possibly. But it's having a right old go at this area in front of it, really close to it as well. But anyway, I just thought that was interesting. A Leopard 1A tank doing its thing. Then I was talking yesterday about drones and about how UGVs, unmanned ground vehicles, can be used in a whole variety of ways. They can be used offensively, machine guns on top, to attack Russian positions. We've seen evidence of that. We have seen people be evacuated, and we've seen supplies get dropped off. We've seen mines get planted. We've seen them be used as kamikaze weapons. So there's a whole range of how these are used. Roy says the tough little Ukrainian Ratel-H UGV has been used extensively for mine laying and logistical missions. Now the powerful six-wheeled Ratel-H is in service with a 400 kilogram hauling capacity and a whopping 1,500 kilogram towing capacity, enough to tow a van. I mean, this goes to show how useful UGVs can be, and I think are becoming. Here we see it towing a whole bunch of logs and it has 1,500 kilogram towing capacity. Wow. I wonder how long it can last as well, towing that kind of weight. Fairly good at getting through those muddy puddles there, and seems to have a decent enough speed on it when it's not encumbered, of course. So that is another UGV there. You can see it's towing a van with you can see it's got space for a stretcher. There it is, actually carrying supposedly an injured person. I think that's a real bit of footage rather than simulated. Has lights on to work at night as you use it, operate it remotely. Yeah, just good bits of kit the Ukrainians are consistently producing. Okay, here we see the horrors of the Russian FPV drone strikes. They attacked 2 cars clearly marked humanitarian. Inside were volunteers in the trailer drinking water for frontline villages. No sign of any military presence. This wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate strike on those saving lives. Another war crime, says UA Voyager. I know, I was just looking at a video of Ed, the guy that used to work for Base UA, who was meeting Richard Branson actually in London. He's lost his limbs. Some of his limbs as a result of a strike on his humanitarian vehicle. It happens, and it happens all too often. Here's a video of similar sort of war crime going on. So Kherson firefighters extinguishing a building that was on fire after a strike, and then the firefighters, are attacked by a drone. The rescuers managed to hide and were not injured. So this is the video.
Дрон! Дрон! Быстрее, быстрее, быстрее! Дрон! Чей дрон? Прячемся!
You can hear some people trying to shoot down the drones as well. So your firefighters being targeted by drones in what's probably a double tap strike there. And here we have Russians once again showing how they eliminated a Ukrainian agent. It's absolutely not staged, totally believable. We can only hope their Oscar is already on the way. Filming such an action scene, now that's real craftsmanship, says Wall Translated. This is on RT here. This is clearly staged again. I mean, I don't know why the Russians keep doing this, but it's so freaking obvious the way they do it. Just like, it's almost like a student video. Let's go. It's absolutely terrible. Just whatever this thing exploding is over here, it's clearly not a proper thing. Anyway, classic sort of visuals you get here of someone lying on their back and having been shot. Not really a clear visual of them in a way that you could confirm that they're being killed. You know, they're lying on lying on their front with their back showing is often a real show. And then it's like, oh, look what we found in a plastic bag. Yet again, plastic bags. We've seen that before. And then a bunch of stuff. It's just, anyway, I'd bet my mortgage that is staged, as so many of them have been. Right, we're going on to distant strikes, and this didn't come out till relatively late. And there's really very little footage. I've only got a bit from Tim White here showing that Kharkiv was struck overnight in a village of Prikolotne. A 68-year-old woman was injured. And drones also hit Chuhiv 2. No casualties reported, but really not particularly widespread attacks, although the numbers are pretty high. So 267 drones used is a very high number of drones, comparatively speaking. You know, if you're comparing to the beginning of the war and earlier in the war, of course, now we're seeing 500, even 700 drones. So, you know, our benchmarks have been skewed, but 267 is a pretty big amount. 178 were taken out by conventional means, 66 by electronic warfare. So my maths would suggest that's 23 23 drones getting through. That's not too bad, but it's still 23 drones getting through. Now, I've talked a number of times about how I think there's a lot more damage being done to Ukrainian military industrial complex and actually things like air bases that we know about because of OPSEC. We just don't hear about it. Lutsk and Lviv were hit pretty hard the other night, but it wasn't a case of widespread civilian infrastructure being taken out, although there were cluster munitions raining down on Lutsk. But actually, I think they were going for military industrial complex sites and air bases. Indeed, so I showed you that a couple of places there were firms data to suggest a place in Lviv and a place in Lutsk, both involved in aviation. One was a MiG-29 engine repair place, and one was a MiG plane repair place. So they were on fire big time, as according to firms. Some people saying, is that all you've got, firms? Well, yeah, actually, that is really bloody important. Like, if you've got widespread fires at a place that you know is part of the industrial military complex, like if that was in Russia, we'd be going, well, that's on fire, that's been hit. And it's the same with Ukraine. Ukraine has been hit hard in ways that we're not always aware of. They will publicize pictures like this very often because, I'm not trying to be critical, or I guess it is. I'm not being cynical, but and they're not being cynical. This is PR. This is war, right? They don't want to show the Russian successes and the Russians blowing up sensitive targets. They will show civilian infrastructure getting hit because that is potentially shows a war crime, and B, it brings sympathy from abroad. And it gets people really angry with Russia. But they will also be doing stuff like this. So a large fire caused by Russian airstrike was detected at the Kryvyi Rih International Airport. So yesterday I reported that, I think it was actually from the afternoon, the day before, that Kryvyi Rih was attacked. We don't really hear anything about it other than some blur and smoke rising in the background. But here, a large fire caused by a Russian airstrike was detected at Kryvyi Rih International Airport. That is a pretty sizable fire there. There's no doubt about that. Now, War Vehicle Tracker says Russia has drastically increased strikes on Ukrainian Air Force-related targets, such as airfields and other infrastructure. Recommend checking out a post from someone who's documented all of them. That it will include the Lutsk and Lviv targets there. So just be warned. I think the Russians have probably done a fairly, I don't know whether it's a good job, but they have done a job on the Ukrainian Air Force infrastructure, I think, recently. Those huge strikes will have predominantly been aiming for military targets, irrespective of whether, all the footage we see is of civilian targets. Now, the Ukrainians have been very quiet for 3 nights now. The only information I can gather from last night was really this strike on Energiya again. I think that's the 4th time that's been hit recently. So another strike is reported on an Energiya military plant in Yelets in Russia. The plant was subject to Ukrainian drone strikes in recent weeks already. It's known for producing batteries for missile guidance and correction systems. So it's a very useful target there. And it has got drone protection at that factory. Here, again, Yelets, Lipetsk region, JSE Energiya was attacked. Voronezh was also attacked tonight, and we're going to look at Voronezh in a second. So this is Yelets and the Energiya, I believe. It might be going on to Voronezh, I don't know. And then this is Voronezh. So first of all, Tim White says, and what you're going to be doing is looking at that black helicopter there. He says, this seems genuine, but it's a video from Voronezh that I find strange. Something in the sky can be seen shooting down at the ground. Is it a Russian helicopter? It can't be shooting drones like this. Surely not a hovering drone delivering munitions. Open to suggestions. So what is going on here? Let's have a look at it here. So Jane Kiev says a young Russian narrator uses every curse word in the book to describe the scene of a Russian helicopter freely firing into a Russian residential area in an attempt to shoot down a Ukrainian drone. This is Voronezh in Russia. I'm still wondering what is going on here, because that's the sort of thing you would do if you had a low hovering drone. Right, if a drone has already come down, then you're not going to be shooting at it. So see this helicopter here. It is shooting, and each of the flashes are probably tracer rounds. Tracer rounds are one in every however many rounds. So on top of that tracer round, there will be a whole bunch of other rounds being shot down. I don't think it's anything larger than rounds here, but they are shooting at the ground here. I just don't understand why you'd be doing that when the sorts of drones that would be used in strikes on places in Voronezh will be your Beaver drones or your Yelets drones that are like, you know, sort of planes, prop drones that will fly and then go down into some kind of terminal phase and hit the target. You don't have FPV drones hovering in the sky this far behind the border. So what is this helicopter shooting at? There, flash. Shooting again. You can see the flashes, flash.
Ой, блин.
And it's still shooting down there, almost vertically down. It's very difficult to see, especially as you move in the camera around. But you've got a helicopter just freely firing at stuff below it in the city of Voronezh. Absolutely bizarre. Now, I've already reported on this, but during one of the conversations with Zelensky, Trump wondered why Ukraine had not yet struck Moscow or St. Petersburg. We can if you give us the weapons, said Zelensky to Trump. Trump said that Ukraine should put more pressure on Putin, and that includes St. Petersburg. Wow. So he's advocating for wide-scale strikes on Moscow and St. Petersburg. Now, it's worth noting that Denmark has approved the provision of satellite services to Ukraine's armed forces via the European Defence Agency, the EDA, according to the Danish Defence Minister. Also, in fact, I'm going to have a look at Japan, Ukraine, because they have had a satellite deal as well that it might be worthy of note. I can't find it there. Actually, here it is. So Japan connects Ukraine to its SAR satellite system. This helps Ukraine see Russian movements nearly immediately, plus it lessens Ukraine's dependence on the US, which is fantastic. Long but worth watching. There's a video you can go and watch on that from the military show. So you have Japan and Denmark providing satellite imagery to Ukraine, and that is super, super important. Okay, going back to, I already did a whole video on this morning, just very quickly, $10 billion worth of weapons that NATO countries are buying off the US to help Ukraine. I gave you an analogy this morning, and some of you in the thread were like, actually, you can improve the analogy as follows. So here's the analogy in its improved form. You are standing by a pond. Harry is drowning in a pond. Harry needs some assistance. You have a ring on you that you could provide to Harry to help Harry survive and not drown. But you don't. You wait for someone to come up to you and you sell them that ring so that they can go and save Harry. So Jim comes up and says, well, can I have that ring? You say, well, no, you can't have it, but you can buy it off me. And then Jim says, okay, I'll buy it off you for $10 billion. You go, there you go, there's my ring. And then it's now your ring. You can go and have that. And then Jim goes and saves Harry. Now, should we be congratulating myself for selling a ring to Jim rather than providing that ring to Harry directly so that Harry can be saved? That's the kind of, I think, calculation that's going on here. Now, Trump asked Zelensky why he didn't hit Moscow, as we've heard. Now, that would involve potentially Tomahawk cruise missiles. So this is a potential for Trump going forward. He might have some leverage with possibly the desire for Trump to provide Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. So it's already been talked about. This is something now on the table, although they're not going to be receiving them imminently or maybe even at all, but it is an option for Trump. Now, I talked about Melania Trump earlier being potentially quite important in some of the calculations here, and she could represent, I mean, she's from Slovenia, some experience with the Russian world to a degree. Melania Trump, I wasn't familiar with your game. I like that. So this is Trump.
I go home, I tell the First Lady, and I spoke to Vladimir today. We had a wonderful conversation. She said, oh, really? Another city was just hit. So it's like, look.
So she seems to be the person who is illustrating to Trump that, hey, you might feel you've had a really good conversation with Putin, but he's then gone and hit another city. I mean, the weird thing is Trump's not hearing that from his own intelligence sources. Like, he should be being briefed. Why is he getting briefed from his wife on social media? So that's weird. I mean, that is a bit of a problem. But now you've got the Times writing, Ukraine has an unexpected ally in the White House, according to journalist and biographer Mary Jordan. Quote, Melania's sympathy for Ukraine is not surprising because she grew up in former Yugoslavia, where the Russians were never sympathetic. So it could be an important component in Trump's decision-making, but I don't think they spend an awful lot of time together, to be perfectly frank. Right, then we had a pretty brutal assessment by Brit Hume. So Fox News' chief political analyst says, and this comes from Fox News, Trump now realizes Putin played him.
Так, я думаю, слухай.
Oh, damn it, that's the translated version. Hang on. Here we go.
Yeah, I think, look, it's clear from what the president himself has said, although he wouldn't put it this way, that he got played by Putin, and it dragged on for months. And he was being jollied along under the impression that Putin had obviously given him that Putin wanted to end the war and was prepared to negotiate from where we are. And it's pretty clear now that Putin didn't want to end the war where we are. He had more conquest in mind, and perhaps wanted his whole original purpose of taking Ukraine to be fulfilled. And I think that's the Ukrainians have held him off. And Trump, I think, understandably, didn't want to add a lot more weaponry into the equation at the beginning of his term.
So on and so forth. I mean, the idea here is that Putin was playing Trump. Trump got played. And I think that's a fair assessment there. And I think it's got to this point where Trump realized that. And he's pretty much admitted that himself. But as Brit Hume says, not in that language. Now, the problem is he has threatened to put these tariffs on. Now, remember, tariffs aren't sanctions. So I think I slipped up this morning in just smashing those terms together. But he's threatened to put 100% tariffs on, and it appears that there would be secondary sanctions on, well, secondary tariffs on these countries who are buying Russian hydrocarbons, etc., if there's no peace deal achieved within 50 days. 60 days is what Putin wanted in order to continue going about his business and achieve some of his objectives. So it could be that Trump is allowing Putin to just go about and do his business. But the bill that one was thinking was going to be utilized by Trump in order to put those secondary hits on other nations is being paused now, we hear. So US Senate has decided to postpone consideration of the new anti-Russian sanctions bill initiated by Graham and Blumenthal. At this stage, quote, at this stage, the president intends to take action on parts of this himself. So instead of this being a congressional thing, it seems to be a unilateral tool and decision by Trump. Without the need to go to Congress. I think that's a bit of a problem because he's going to have to use emergency powers in order to do that. And I think it's much safer if you get congressional backing. But they are not wanting to continue to push for what looked to have been even harder sanctions against Russia through that bill than what Trump is threatening. Dmitry Medvedev is underwhelmed. Trump issued a theatrical ultimatum to the Kremlin. The world shuddered, expecting the consequences. Belligerent Europe was disappointed. Russia didn't care. So they're like, nah, don't care. Now you've got the US ambassador to the UN saying this.
Europe and Canada will pay for the weapons. The United States will manufacture them. Obviously, we make the best weapons systems in the world, and everyone wants them, and we're going to prioritize those going to Ukraine. And what this says also to Vladimir Putin, I think, is very loud and clear, which is, we've given you a chance for peace. President Trump is a peacemaker, but if you want war, we will arm Ukraine. and Europe will pay for it. It's actually, I think, a great step in ultimately bringing this war to a conclusion, to an end. You know, in the last 18 months, Russia has gained about 1% of Ukrainian land. I mean, they're making no success. They're losing thousands of soldiers every single day, and way too many, private citizens in Ukraine and the big cities are being injured. So I think this is a great next step in finally ending this war. But again, if Vladimir Putin wants to continue to fight on the battlefields of Ukraine, the United States of America will sell Europe armaments so that they can be used by Ukraine to defend themselves.
Again, the focus there is on sell. If Russia are going to continue this war, we'll sell stuff. We will sell as much stuff as we can. Sell. Will we help Ukraine? Well, no, we'll sell stuff so that other people can help Ukraine. And by point of fact, we'll be helping them because we sold stuff. You know, as I said earlier, when my missus gets me a present for Christmas, I don't open a present and thank the shop. Oh, thanks, Amazon. That's amazing. Thanks, Amazon, for this. I'm really, really pleased that I've got this lovely thing. My missus is sitting there getting pissed off that I'm not thanking her. No, this is the doing of Europe, and they are buying. They've just been allowed to buy stuff off the US. As it stands, let's hope that it does change. The US does become more forthcoming in their own support for Ukraine. Right. There were biblical storms over the weekend, apparently, says Tim White. And today, though, in Zaporizhia, this is yesterday, region, there are plagues of locusts, big buggers too. So, fascinating. You get locusts in Ukraine. Wow. So that is a pretty scary sight if you've got crops. And there are lots of crops around Zaporizhia, I can tell you. So, yeah, a bit of a problem when the locusts are plaguing as they are there. Oh, well, just another challenge for the Ukrainians. Take care, everybody, and I will speak to you soon.